Well, buckle in, junior hockey fans. We are just 2 weeks into the OHL season, and have we got a lot to talk about this week, including, very selfishly for me, a Saturday night at the Bayshore. For me, it doesn't get a whole lot better, but Dan Mahar, how did you enjoy your second week of the Ontario Hockey League season? No shortage of intrigue and entertainment out there.
It is definitely intriguing. There's definitely been a lot of surprises. We'll see if they last. I did not get any Bayshore fries though, so I'm a little disappointed.
I do maintain the best fries in the league, but it was a great Saturday night up in the scenic city of Owen Sound. I wanted to give a shout out to Allison Davies, who's a huge supporter of this podcast and does a terrific blog of her own called beyondthebenchmedia.ca. Feel free to check it out. Allison is a terrific photojournalist herself. And when we met, she extends her hand and I said, Allie, like we're old friends, right? And she was cool with that because that's how people in Owen Sound are. Also made an appearance with my buddy JC on the Bear Tracker podcast that just got started up there in Owen Sound. So make sure you check that out. Very well covered media wise in the smallest market in the Ontario Hockey League. But speaking of that, I don't know what I did to Greg Cowan, who covers the attack for the Owen Sound Sun Times, but I think the guy was avoiding me all night. Cowan, I'm wise to you, buddy. I didn't see him till the very end of the game. So something's going on. If there's a smear article that comes out in the Sun Times about yours truly, I don't know what I did to Greg. Like there's plenty of room in the press box for the both of us, but he's a great writer. He was just busy that night, and we had a good time kibitzing at the end of the game. And of course, the commissioner himself, Brian Crawford, was on site in Owen Sound on Saturday as he's in the midst of his league-wide tour. He wants to cover every market by Christmas, and I'm pretty sure he mentioned that his next stop is Ottawa. So, folks up in the nation's capital, watch for the commish to come your way in the not too distant future. And you mentioned those fries, Dan, which for my money, best in the Ontario Hockey League. I also have the good fortune of generally eating for free when I'm at a game because as a member of the media, I get access to the media room. There's usually a meal provided. And in Owen Sound, you could always count on a big old dish of pasta, little side salad, and a tray of Tim Hortons cookies and muffins. Of course, there's coffee, some water, everything you need. And this year, I don't know if it's going to happen all season long. I have to go 3 more times, and I'm okay with it because it was like taco night at the Bayshore. Let me tell you, a little messy on the spicy side for a softy like me, but boy, oh boy, did they! I don't know what's going on. I think I'm gonna do an OHL media food tour. I'm sure, like the fans would love it, right? Everybody wants to know what I stuff my face with before a broadcast, right?
I'm sure that's what's on top of everyone's mind when they tune in, Carl. So yeah, then let's do that.
All right. As the commissioner makes his tour around the league just to get to know markets, I didn't see him eat a thing, by the way, in the media room. I'm going to go on the media room food tour and share all of my adventures with you. So thanks to Owen Sound, I know lots of markets have Saturday night games like Barrie and Sudbury and North Bay love their Saturdays, but there is something for me and always has been for many, many years now. A Saturday night at the Bayshore. That is the thing to do when you're in Owen Sound during hockey season. It's a pretty special feeling. So good job by the organization for putting on a pretty good environment and atmosphere for folks there, despite the fact, and I think you can understand why, some fans might be a little disgruntled, Dan Mahar, because Colby Barlow, the former captain in Owen Sound, is now an Oshawa general. Tristan DeLille, David Bedkowski, a couple of 17-year-olds, along with 2 seconds, 2/3, a fifth, and a seventh, come back to the attack. What do you make of the Barlow deal?
Well, not shocked that he wanted maybe a different opportunity in his last year in the OHL. It's disappointing for the fans in Owen Sound because he's been such a key piece of what was supposed to be a contending team for a couple years there. Never really materialized. I think Owen Sound has to be relatively okay with the return. A lot of high picks there, and then two players they're going to get a bigger opportunity there, both of whom bring something to the table. I think we saw DeLille score in his first game. There's some upside there as well, but it's always disappointing when you see a star player leave. And I think the hands might have been somewhat tied as well. I think there was a limited number of markets that Barlow was looking to go to. And so there was a few factors at play there. But yeah, definitely disappointing when you see a player of that ilk go out, but heads held high. The return was pretty good.
Yeah, Barlow called his shot, didn't he? He said, I'm not coming back. Please work out a deal. And Dale DeGray said he waited until he got the chance to speak directly to Colby Barlow, not even going through Barlow's agent. They had that conversation. And then, according to Dale DeGray, there were 5 teams, all Eastern Conference, that were interested in Barlow's services. I'm not surprised the interest would have been widespread for a player of Barlow's caliber. 5 teams, I don't know, but certainly Oshawa was one that had long been rumored, and that's where he lands. And this gives Oshawa, I mean, it's almost frightening. They were good before adding a player of Barlow's ilk, and now they make the statement that they want to go back to where they were a season ago, right? Winning the East and being the Eastern Conference representative in the OHL final.
Definitely, Oshawa is scary. I know the start's been a little slow, but they're still waiting on Cal Rich. They've got a few players that haven't shown. We don't know if Dylan Rubrek's coming back, so we've got a few question marks there. But if they get that lineup full and complete, Beckett Seneca just returned, so they're looking pretty scary, and even have a little bit of capital to play with that beyond just Barlow. So yeah, they're not going to be an easy out.
You mentioned that you like the deal, as do I. 2 young players that have the opportunity to blossom with greater opportunity. And then you add in the 6 picks. I've heard some make comparisons between this deal and the Carson Rakoff deal that the Kitchener Rangers made with Brampton back in the summer. I can see it insofar as you're talking about a high-end talent in this league being moved to another team. But frankly, from where I'm sitting, I look at the deals differently. Kitchener gets 10 draft picks back for Carson Rakoff with the 3 seconds, 3 thirds, 3 fourths, and a seventh. But when you add the players that Dale DeGray got in Owen Sound, in DeLille and Bedkowski, you're doing something a lot more for now as opposed to for the future like the Rangers did. And make no mistake, I think both general managers got good value for their players. They addressed the needs that they had, but because one has a more immediate impact with those warm bodies that will contribute to your lineup, I don't see a whole lot of comparison other than 2 high-end players being moved to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, threads of similarities, I suppose, and it depends what the GMs are looking for. I think always when you're moving a high-end player like that, you probably want to get something now for your lineup, and then the picks as well, which is what Owen Sound did. And Mike McKenzie's case in the Carson Rakoff deal, I think he really needed to reload that cupboard. The picks were pretty barren, so I think all picks worked for him. Often you like to see GMs like to see that mix, and DeLille and Bedkowski are 2 pieces that can step right in and weren't necessarily getting the opportunity in Oshawa. So you kind of hedge your bets some ways doing that. You get some now help, you get some future capital. So it's kind of hard to even evaluate as a GM till years down the road and say, well, 4 of these pieces worked out, so I think we did okay, that kind of thing.
That's a great point. If anybody connected to the Owen Sound organization is even a little bit happy about this deal, it would have to be Bobby Ryan. That's the only name I can come up with because Bobby Ryan holds the Owen Sound franchise record for goals scored in a junior hockey career with 133. Barlow exits Owen Sound having never scored less than 30, which he got as a rookie, then scored 46, then scored 40. So 116 as an Owen Sound attack coming into this season. And surely Barlow will score more than 18, even if he was still in Owen Sound, not with a wagon like in Oshawa. But he would have established a new record. Bobby Ryan's record remains safe for now in Owen Sound. But something you touched on earlier, Dan, that I just want to take half a step further, and that is what this means for the Owen Sound attack, right? Because it was just a few short years ago when you had Colby Barlow and Cedric Gandon and Denny Gore and Servac Petrovsky. And now with the deal of Barlow, they're all gone. And a few years ago, when these 4 burst onto the scene, and it was the late Ray McKelvey that said, put the kids together when Greg Walters was the head coach there. Put the kids together all on one line and let them run. And it worked out really well. We thought the attack and their next era had arrived a year early, and it just never worked out.
Player evaluation is such a difficult thing, but such a critical thing. And it's not just player evaluation, it's chemistry evaluation. It's all these different factors that come in. And you look at a lot of rosters on paper and say, this team should have won or should be a top contender, and then it never materializes. And sometimes you see a roster that doesn't look that great on paper and it just catches lightning in a bottle. So it's such a chemistry exercise to try and get these rosters to blend and gel. And for whatever reason, that Owen Sound attack team, they looked bloated for bear because those players were producing at 17 years old and thinking, well, by the time they're 18, 19, this is going to be a wagon of a team, right? And it seemed to kind of go down from there. And then because of what they did when they were young, the GM made the assessment that, well, we're still going to go for it. Last year, we're gonna trade out some pieces. Nico Addy moved. They're gonna add Connor Smith. They're gonna bring in pieces and try and go for it because optically on paper, still looking like a real good team, but it just never materialized, and that has to hurt the whole community, but especially the front office.
So I think the $1 million question now in Owen Sound is whether or not Dale DeGray hangs on to Carter George. You want to have a quality goaltender with a rebuilding team so that things don't get away from you too much, because losing and losing badly is different than losing but staying in games and remaining competitive. But I don't know, given where Owen Sound is going by way of trajectory this season, that you turn down any opportunities or offers that might come your way for the likes of Carter George. What do you think? Does
Well,
he remain an Owen Sound attack?
your GM, they'll always tell you they're not doing their job if they're not listening, right? So at very least, he's going to listen. I think Dale DeGray's been pretty clear that Carter George is going nowhere. He's not even entertaining that right now. But I think any logic would tell you that you have to listen down the road, do you not? Especially when you look at some of the offers that are probably going to come across your desk. There's a couple teams that are going to be in the hunt that really could use a goaltending upgrade. And if they're going to back up a dump truck full of picks and young players at your doorstep, you have to consider it. You're doing what's best for the franchise. Nobody in Owen Sound wants to see Carter George go out the door. He's got another year left, if not an overage year, unlikely, but he's got time left in this league. So you're going to get a haul. And if you don't get the haul, you hang on to him. But you're right, Mike. I think the writing's starting to appear on the wall that they're going to have to listen.
I'm not huge on speculation, but some of these lines aren't exactly zigzagging from point A to point B here. I mean, it's certainly possible. If you're going to move a player, whether Colby Barlow tied your hands or not, if you're moving a player like that, you're certainly entertaining offers that might come your way for the likes of a Carter George. And again, if I'm going to ramp up the speculation just a little bit further here, I can think of a trading partner in the past, even in the conference, even in the division, and I'm looking at the London Knights, that might be interested in acquiring Carter George's services. And I say that because we talked about this, Dan. Coming into the season, the London Knights had a glut of overagers, 5 of them. Now, Gazizov has moved on to play pro, but they still have 4, London does, on the roster, including goaltender Owen Wilmore, who was challenged essentially by general manager Mark Hunter before the season, saying, you got to show us something. Like, you're the overager. Let's see what you've got for us. And it hasn't exactly been a stellar start for Mr. Wilmore, with an 8.29 goals against average and a save percentage below 800 at 786. So if anybody's looking for an upgrade in goal, whether or not they can afford it, I don't know, but London could be a landing spot.
Definitely. Well, I think the issue here is going to be timing, correct? Because we know that the way Mark and Dale Hunter operate, they're not going to leave a gaping wound for long. They'll give Owen Wilmore his opportunity, but they're not going to sit on it till Christmas or later and let goaltending be a concern. So they will plug that hole sooner than later, and just lines up perfectly for a kid like Carter George. You get a high-end goaltender to a high-end team that's got a great chance at winning the title this year. You would presumably move out Owen Wilmore and resolve your overage situation at the same time. The issue, I think, is the timing. Well, the timing lineup. I don't think Owen Sound's anywhere near ready to move on from Carter George, meaning that if London wants to make this happen sooner than later and rectify those issues now or in the short term, they're really going to have to blowtail Degree away with an offer. So we'll see, but I think it makes a ton of sense for London. It's just, is it going to be enough to make sense for Owen Sound anytime soon?
That's a great point. And how quickly we forget that it was Owen Wilmore last spring, right? That came into game 3 of the OHL final versus the Oshawa Generals when the Gens scored 6 on 19 shots against Michael Simpson. And Wilmore comes in after 40 minutes and shuts the door for the next 2 periods plus because it went to double overtime, making 17 saves. And London comes from behind for the 7-6 double overtime victory. Having said that, this season, London is getting some decent play from Alexei Medvedev, the 17-year-old goaltender there. His numbers are much stronger right now. Save percentage over 920, goals against below 3. It is very, very early. And to that point, let me share with you an email we got from our good old buddy Johnny 807, who writes to OHL podcast at Rogers.com. Do you think a roll call would be complete without an appearance from Johnny 807? London roll call. No, Johnny, it wouldn't have been. Welcome back to the show. Definitely curious to see your guys' take this week about the, well, not so illustrious start of the London Knights season as the reigning, defending, undisputed OHL champions. It seems to me that this is what happens when you lose your best players to NHL training camps and potentially making a spot on NHL rosters. I'm not faulting them for that. If an OHL title is what Easton Cowan, Denver Barkey, Oliver Bonk, Sam Dickinson, and Sam O'Reilly need in order to get their big break in the show, then so be it. I wish them nothing but the best in their future endeavors. You never want to read that in an email, by the way. When your email says best of luck in your future endeavors, things did not go well for you. Anyway, Johnny continues, after all, this is the nature of a developmental league, and one of the reasons why I fell in love with the OHL when I first moved to London in 2018. No team will be the same every year. I can understand Johnny's concern, Dan, but as we've also documented, it is so early. Things will sort out. And oh yeah, by the way, Oliver Bong, Easton Cowan, already coming back to your team. You're fine. You're fine.
You're definitely fine. Yeah, we talked about this on the last podcast where nothing that happens in the first few weeks really matters. Everyone looked at that London roster and saw who was missing. Plus, let's remember the history of the London Knights a bit here in recent times. The starts haven't always been fantastic. That team ramps up into shape pretty quickly by the middle term of the season, if you call it that. If you divide the season into 3 stanzas. So nothing that happens in the first stanza concerns the Hunters too much, I don't think. They'll figure it out. They plug their holes. They figure out who their go-to people are. It's going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. And when you're adding those players in trade, we talked about Colby Barlow moving well. The 4 players you just mentioned, Mike, coming back in the lineup is a pretty significant boost as well. So yeah, you're fine.
You're absolutely fine. Remember, the London Knights may be 1-3 through 4 games right now. I'll take you back just a couple of seasons to 2022, 23, as Dan just pointed out. The Knights in their first 6 games were 1-4-1. Then they went on to win 44 of their next 62. Okay. 44, 17-1 the rest of the way. And what did that mean in 2022, 2023? Oh, that meant the Midwest Division title, second place in the Western Conference, and an appearance versus Peterborough in the OHL final. So I think things worked out okay then. Johnny, don't worry too much. Sticking with the Knights for just a minute, because we alluded to that overage glut that they have. Wilmore, you've got Jacob Julian, Alec Leonard, Landon Sim. Decisions to make here for the Knights. And they're not the only team. A few others, we saw a couple of them this weekend, Dan. One of them in the Guelph Storm, who were in Kitchener. I think it's safe to say that Jake Carabella and Max Nemesnikov kind of have their spots secured with this Storm team. So then you've got Ryan McGuire, a player I like an awful lot, and Thomas Budnick, who's off right now trying to make pro in the coast with the ECHL's team in Kalamazoo. Ottawa as well. It's got Will Jerwa and Matt Mayich, who I would assume are kind of the locks there. Thomas Sermon then and goaltender Colin McKenzie are the other 2 that are competing for just those 3 overage spots in goal. Besides McKenzie, Ottawa has a couple of 17-year-olds. So London's not the only team dealing with a surplus right now of overagers. Again, it's still early. These things have a way of sorting themselves out. And I don't think any team is going to leave a player, pardon me, dangling in the breeze until, late November here.
No, GM and for the most part, a lot of them I think have had these conversations with these overage players and told them what's going to happen under various scenarios, and they keep them informed as things. They'll find homes for them where possible. I think a lot of factors come into play though when you're making decisions about who comes and who goes. And you reference the Guelph Storm. We look at the three overages who are currently playing for them, all forwards. Probably will be getting Jet Luchenko back at some point before too long, one would think. Another forward into the mix. So if you want to have that mix of overagers at all three positions, or at least at two of the three positions, then you're probably going to be looking to move one of the forwards, but we don't know if Budnick's coming back. And then the other factor, of course, is what's the return? Some of these guys will be released and look for play elsewhere outside of the league. And then there will be some overagers that are coveted around the league and will bring you some sort of return in terms of picks or players. So teams will have that decision to make too. We look at that with Kitchener Rangers, Mike, with their four. We have Pugliese, Misljevic, Trent Swick, and Jackson Parsons. One or two of those would probably return some capital from other teams, whereas others may not. So do you take the return, or do you move out the one who had the least impact on your roster? So these are all decisions these GMs have to make, but rest assured they've all had these conversations with the kids and their agents, and it will get settled before long.
And for the Kitchener Rangers, that comes to a head this week as Trent Swick makes his return. And the other three for the Rangers are healthy in Parsons, Misljevic, and Pugliese. So, yeah, expect these things to start being sorted out in the next couple of weeks, let's just say. You mentioned Jet Luchenko. I just have to add that to the Guelph Storm conversation. A season ago, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty terrible at what I put on record on this podcast. Oh, don't worry, Storm fans. Matthew Proctor's coming back. No, he didn't. Proctor could still be an OA in this league, okay? And now the Storm's number one pick to the NHL last spring, Jet Luchenko, is starting the season as the third line center with the Philadelphia Flyers. You got to think that the Storm fans are going, what in HE double hockey sticks do the hockey gods have against us? I think Luchenko will come back too, but you're probably a little bit nervous if you're in Guelph right now.
Nervous mostly because of the lack of depth at center in the Philadelphia Flyers organization. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. Jet Luchenko's a great player, but he belongs in the OHL this year. We'll see how many games he gets there. I feel like I should take partial responsibility, Mike, because I did joke about it last week about Luchenko sticking with Philadelphia. I still believe strongly that he'll be back before too long. He'll get that audition, he'll get that time. But I think Guelph fans can rest a little more assured this year than last year.
All right. Just in case you thought this entire episode of the OHL podcast was about a Saturday night at the Bayshore and the Colby Barlow trade, oh no, Quinton Musty and our old friend Jeff Merrick have something to say about that as well. Merrick reemerged on the scene this week. Everybody in hockey is happy to see him active on social media again. And he let us all know that Quinton Musty, the San Jose Sharks prospect, is at home in Hamburg, New York, awaiting a trade, not reporting to the Sudbury Wolves.
This one gets a little contentious, right? Because he's a great player, huge offensive numbers, is pretty much on par with anyone in this league. But the Sudbury Wolves fired back a little at this trade request, did they not? This statement saying that it's disappointing to them because the very things that Quinton Musty wants to work on are the very things that we hired this coaching staff to address. So kind of suggesting, this is not a perfect player. You got a lot to learn. We're going to work with you. And now you're asking out. So clearly some hard feelings there. And when you take that step, it can have one of two effects. It can kind of be a wake-up call and, fire that shot off the bow that you were intending, but it also could have negative impacts too. Maybe are you devaluing the player that you might have to move now? So we'll see how this plays out, but clearly a little bit of hard feelings in that deal right now.
So Musty requests the trade, and as you point out, Dan, reading directly from the Sudbury Wolves statement in response that came 4 or 5 hours later, it is unfortunate that he has taken this position as the areas of his game needing further development to become an NHL player are the exact areas our new coaching staff has been focused on throughout the summer. That coaching staff, by the way, Scott Barney, who we've talked about coming over from the Humboldt Broncos, a guy that we absolutely love, Drake Barahowski, and Andrew Desjardins, who collectively, between the two of them, have over 1,000 games of NHL experience, or between the three of them, you put them all in there. So Sudbury says our priority remains building and developing a strong and competitive team. If a deal arises that significantly improves our team, we will consider it. Until then, Quentin remains an important part of the Sudbury Wolves, and he is welcome to join the team at any time. Talk about playing the dad card here. You go ahead and pout in the corner, and when you're done pouting, you come on back over here and we'll sort things out. I will just add to your point, Dan. You think that maybe, and I get where you're coming from, that this is devaluing the asset that you may ultimately move. I wondered if this actually doesn't send a message to potential suitors that if you want Musty, you're going to have to work pretty hard because we still want him. So he's not going on the cheap just because he asked for the trade.
Well, I like that aspect of it because they're kind of playing their cards, right? They're saying, it was not our plan to trade him. We want him here. They're making it very clear. You were a part of our plan. We're very disappointed you want out. So you're right. I mean, but I do like when they play their cards, put them on the table like that, and just call it as they see it. And maybe it's hoping that the player changes his mind, which is what it sounds like at this point. But you're right. It's also, it is telling the world that this player does have things he needs to work on. And is there maybe a subtle suggestion there that this player is a little bit delusional about his own game? I don't know, but there's something there that has to play out because this is a big name that could land a Barlow-esque return.
Without question. And of course, every time that there's a player apparently available on the market, everybody says he's going to look really good in London green. We'll see. We already talked about what could or could not happen with any potential Carter George move, but this also hints at the power or influence that a player has over their own playing career. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. Now, whatever happens with Musty and whether Barlow and the Gens avenge last year's finals loss, we know this for sure. Musty and Barlow will be in the National Hockey League with San Jose and Winnipeg, respectively. What's that? Well, I'm talking about the NHL. Well, of course I am, because the quest for the Stanley Cup starts now. The puck is dropping on the 2024-25 season. Get in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. It is super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. Now, Dan, and we're different on this, but I'm a Leafs fan. You cheer for the team the Leafs are playing this weekend, but I'm always just going to look, what does it look like for my team? They're a plus 130 at minus 1.5, or on the money line, a minus 192. Leafs, pretty strong favorite versus the Habs this weekend. Remember, lines and odds are subject to change. But if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That is code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. This is a big week for CHL players, Dan, because there is a vote in the United States. The NCAA will vote this week on whether or not to allow former CHL players into their ranks. This all stems from a class action lawsuit back in August that is challenging the ban because the NCAA has long considered CHL players to be quote unquote professionals. And if you play one game, 1 minute, one shift in the Canadian Hockey League, you are ineligible for the NCAA. It sounds as though with this vote that is about to change.
I think it's a slam dunk, Mike. It feels a little bit to me like this is all kind of a bit of a charade in the NCAA. They have this structure where they have to have the members vote, and make it look like it was in their control and their decision. But I think the writing's on the wall for all of them. They realize that they don't have great legs to stand on this legal challenge, and that the boulders rolling downhill towards CHL players having to be allowed to play in the NCAA. So it sounds like a fait accompli to me, Mike. I think this is happening, and it's just a matter of time till it's formalized. And we've already seen the players declare their intent to play in the NCAA next year after having played in the CHL. So we've talked about this before. I think it's going to happen, and it has all kinds of implications, particularly for lower levels. U sports in Canada and kind of BCHL Tier 2 type leagues, potentially USHL. But I think it's going to actually open up some options for the CHL as well. And you might get some of these players like Michael Hage, Adam Valentini, some of these players that have gone to USHL to maintain their eligibility, but still want to play at a relatively high level. They might just report to the CHL now for a couple of years. So a lot's going to change. We'll see how it plays out, but I think this is pretty much a done deal, Mike, for the first time in our lifetime.
I would agree that it is pretty much a done deal. One of the other aspects that might be advantage CHL in all of this is that the National Hockey League can draft a player from the Canadian Hockey League, sign him, and still return him to continue playing in that Canadian Hockey League. That obviously wouldn't apply, at least not yet. Maybe that's phase 2 in the NCAA, but certainly not this point. But you hit all the highlights there, Dan. There are a number of questions that will be answered in due course. I suspect, as you point out, that this vote will be yes, allowing CHL players that eligibility to compete in the NCAA. And I don't think that dramatically changes things in the CHL. It does for some of those lower tier leagues. But the big thing that stands out to me, and this goes back to kind of the Barlow and Musty examples in the OHL right now, where Barlow requests a trade, the request is granted, Musty requests a trade. We'll see what happens. This, to me, NCAA vote sounds like this is going to be good for the players. They will have a lot more flexibility in choosing their own path where they think their development is best served.
Amen. It's definitely going to open up options for the players, which is what they wanted, which is great for them. You might see some other subtle changes around as well. So I know there's been some consternation about that fact that the CHL has a draft and you have to play where you're drafted or else go through this trade demand process. Whereas in the schools, you can kind of pick your schools for the most part. So there's that difference that might have to get sorted out in some way. But the other piece too is you might see some things like players leaving junior a bit earlier than intended. So who's to say a player now that's 18 years old, just drafted the NHL team might say, well, we really prefer you play in the NCAA this year against some older players, get more time in the weight room to bulk up. So you might see a little bit of that, which could potentially hurt the CHL. But at this point, it's a lot of speculation how things are going to change. But you're right. The bottom line is players will have more options and won't be as limited in their choices at 16 and 17 years old.
Absolutely something that we will continue to watch with interest. I'm sure every junior hockey fan in this country, and particularly here on the OHL podcast, is curious as to how this will all play out. But again, we seem to be in agreement, as are others, that this vote will go in favor of allowing that CHL eligibility. Dan, you have a bit of a bee in your bonnet, a knot in your knickers this week about the disclosure of injury news from OHL teams. What's got you fired up?
It's just a minor pick, really, Mike. I noticed that there's a lot of secrecy still with some teams around it. It's players' injury status, what's wrong with them, how long they're going to be out, prognosis. And I know that it's personal medical information. Having said that, I don't see the impetus behind being so secretive about it. I mean, fans, it's similar to the information seeking from the league that we talk about and how fans are engaged. They're interested. They want to know these things. I don't know about you, Mike, but I probably get asked 10 times a week by people about injury status. And my personal pet peeve is I'm just getting a little tired of having to say I don't know half the time because we don't get any real information. You get some talk around the board. Sometimes you run into the player themselves and they tell you, but I'm not really sure what the benefit is of the team being terribly secretive about it. It's not like the player's going to return before the injury's healed anyway. And this issue of targeting, we've seen the NHL open up and they have to disclose now and be very clear about injury and timelines. So the NHL can do it. I don't see why the OHL can't as well. Just access to information.
if I play devil's advocate here, as you point out, you don't see the benefit to teams keeping it under wraps. What's the benefit to teams making the information available?
Engagement with fans, I would say. The biggest thing is it's a relationship with your fans throughout the season, right? Provide information if you want them to be excited about what they're seeing, excited about the product. These fans do get engaged, and there's a sense of frustration when they don't know who's going to be playing week to week. They don't know when these players are going to be coming back. They're purchasing tickets down the road. Is this guy even going to be there? Like, I just think it's a two-way street in the relationship these teams have with fans and those who seek knowledge in the sport throughout the year. So I just think it's a best practice to be as open as you can if there's not a reason to be secretive, and I don't think there is one here.
So I may be accused of having been at this too long and maybe consumed some of the Kool-Aid along the way. But in all honesty, I am 180 degrees opposite you on this. Unless there are uh, undisclosed injuries with teams that I'm not being made aware of. I don't know what more, as fans, information is required to be provided on behalf of the team, other than the player is out with an injury. And they might give a timeline, but even that, as far as I'm concerned, is a mug's game here. I mean, every individual heals at a different pace. You never know. I mean, somebody could say you're going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, and in 3 to 5, you're raring to go. Or they say you might be out 6 to 8 weeks and it turns out to be 12 to 16. I don't know that anybody, and in fact, having just gone through in our family a hospitalization, let me tell you how reluctant the doctors were to give any sort of hard timeline on you'll be out of the hospital on this day or that day. They were just patient, this and that. So I don't know. And you alluded to something else earlier too, Dan, when you talked about personal medical information. I don't know why. I mean, I get that if you choose to play in sport, amateur or professional, that maybe you relinquish your right to privacy around your personal medical information. But if I've got a broken ankle, I don't think that's any business of yours, whether you pay the price for the ticket to come into the arena or not. If the team reports that I've got a lower body injury and I'm day to day, but not today, or day to day and ask me again tomorrow, or 4 to 6 weeks, then I don't think there's anything more that needs to be provided. And I will just finish on, I think there's still more targeting than many might believe. I used to, I've come back around on this. There was a famous story that still gets joked about in Kitchener from many, many years ago. Captain Mike Richards had a knee injury during the playoffs. Pete DeBoer was the coach, and there was a reporter covering the team in Kitchener at the time that was a bit of a thorn in the side for the hockey club and the head coach. They did not get along necessarily well. And so at practice the one day, again, Richards has a knee injury, and the reporter was there, and the team made sure that you could clearly see, because they used fluorescent pink tape, that his wrist was bandaged up. And the reporter was there, the photographers were there. The injury to Mike Richards' left wrist, or right, I can't remember which one, but was well documented in the local newspaper when he was actually suffering from a knee injury. I really think that if an opponent has an advantage, they will exploit that advantage. And don't think for a second, regardless, in this day and age, everybody on the other team doesn't know what's ailing everybody on the other team, right? So I don't think that teams are holding anything back. Player's out, he's injured. Who knows? You put a timeline on it, and then the timeline changes. Then you just have to keep throwing back out more information. It's been delayed. General managers and coaches aren't doctors. It's a player's personal health record. If they want to share it, they can share it. All the team has to tell you is the player is injured. They'll be back when they're back.
Perhaps. I do think you kind of sunk your point with that last point, though. It seems like everyone knows except the fans. The opponents know. They talk to each other. Other teams know. They have this intel. It's a worst kept secret behind the scenes. The only people that don't know are the people in the stands watching. They're seeking the info. And you're right about the targeting. You're talking about a situation in playoffs where it sounds like a player was maybe going to play with the injury and worried about targeting. So that's a different thing. I'm presuming that through the regular season, you're not putting a player back in the lineup before he's good to go. it's not a major deal. I think it's all nonsense, all this lower body, upper body. I think it's just a bit of an antiquated thing in hockey that there's really no reason for anymore.
I meant to look up. Was it Jacques Lemaire that first started the upper body, lower body? I can't remember. It was a coach in the National Hockey League, but that doesn't really matter. I just don't understand what a fan really gains. I mean, okay, so he's got a broken ankle. Oh, okay, he's got a fractured wrist. Like, what difference does it make to the fan what the specifics of the injury are? The fan knows the player's not in the game because he's got an upper or lower or general body soreness injury. Who cares? You know he's not in the game. That's all the team should be obligated to tell you.
And fair enough. I've never bought that argument though, that why do the fans care? I mean, you're asking the fans to care. You're selling the product to them. You ask them to buy tickets, you ask them to show up every week. So they care. They
No,
care.
no,
They want it. So
they
that, yeah.
they care who's in the lineup for sure. And
Yeah.
if you're coming to see Luca Romano of the Kitchener Rangers, like I'm sure a lot of people are right now, or Cameron Reed, then you care if he's in the lineup. But if he's not in the lineup, I don't think the specific reason for him not being in the lineup. In fact, there was a player, was it just last year or 2 years, but very recently, who missed a game because his father died prematurely. I don't think that fans need to know anything other than player X wasn't available to play that night. As long as the team, if you're coming just to see that player, if it's Connor McDavid coming through or Michael Misa on his last trip through this league as an exceptional player, and he's not going to be in the lineup, that's fine. If you know Michael Misa's not in the lineup, but other than that, you don't need the specifics behind it.
I'm not saying you do need to know the specifics. I'm talking about timelines. So in that case, sure, personal reasons, player's going to miss a game. But you are asking player or families to buy tickets 2, 3 weeks out. They want to know these things. I want to know. Like, say if you're going to buy a ticket to watch Michael Misa play right now and he's injured, and you hear he's injured. Well, they're coming to town in 2 weeks. I kind of want to shell out $150 here for my family, but is he going to be in the game? I'm just talking general timelines. There is information that I think you do have a relationship with your fans that you want to be open with. I don't need to know specifics. Just give me an idea. If you know it's 6 weeks, don't tell me it's day to day or go radio silent on it. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I just think you run into so much trouble with that again because hockey executives and hockey coaches are not doctors, and even though they've got the doctors that are assessing players, things can change. They can speed up, they can slow down, and then if you're putting yourself on the line, next thing you know, the fans are going to be banging on your door for a refund because you said he was going to be back in 6 weeks, and I bought my ticket 7 weeks out, and the player wasn't ready. And I don't think you can ever get in that situation.
Well, if the information changes, update it. That's simple. I just think there's got to be a communication, an open communication with the fans. That's all I'm saying.
All right. If a player's not in the game, if it's upper body, it's lower body, I don't care. I don't care if it's a pinky finger. I don't care if it's a baby toe. I just, as long as teams are disclosing that players aren't there, and don't even get me started on how the National Hockey League has to go like the National Football League now, because we all know why. National
Yeah.
Football League got in bed with the gamblers early on, and now the National Hockey League is there as well. And oh, well, time marches on. Yeah, I think I've been around it too long. I don't think that much information, especially somebody's personal medical information, needs to be shared that specifically.
Fair enough. I just know for the number of people that ask me, there's certainly a thirst for this kind of knowledge. So, and if there's no reason to withhold it, I don't know why you would. But
We are just 2 weeks into this OHL season, and we gotta say, like, everything is happening. OHL podcast listeners know it too, because you have been emailing us about one of the three remaining undefeated OHL hockey teams. And you know exactly which one of those teams I am talking about. Plus, the Joey Costanzo story that you absolutely have to hear. This is a must listen. And our prospects of the week are still to come on this episode of the OHL podcast. I want to let you know that when it's time to go to the game, it's time to go to game time. I love being in the arena more than anything else, along with the sights and the sounds. For me, it is the smell of being inside an arena, that ice, the concessions. That's what being at a game live is all about. So I want to let you know about the Game Time app. It's got a new feature right now called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And now it is so simple when you look at the app to find the super deal. It stands out from all of the rest. It's going to give you better value, and you can Buy tickets to your favorite sporting event, your concert tickets with Game Time and Game Time picks. You can also use the app to get a 360 view of your seat before you buy. This is all in pricing, so you're not going to be surprised with any fees at the checkout, and it's got a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Dan Mahar, 2 weeks into the OHL season, 4 games into the OHL season, and the Niagara Ice Dogs are one of 3 remaining undefeated teams. More to the point, the other 2 undefeated teams, Windsor and Saginaw, have suffered an overtime loss. So the Ice Dogs stand above all. What the what?
Would you believe me, Mike, if I told you I actually was going to predict them a couple slots higher in my predictions, and I gave them the Niagara bump down just based on track record? But
You and me
actually,
both.
on paper, I actually like them a fair bit. I love the drafts they've had the last couple of years, and let me tell you, this has to be a statement for them, does it not? They've heard everything everyone, including us, have been saying around the league. And they want to prove that they're for real. They want to prove they're not a joke anymore. And when you take the Brampton Steelheads and whitewash them 7-3, that's a statement to remain undefeated. So I think there's something to prove in that town this year, and I think they're showing early on that they want to prove it.
Funny you should mention that game versus the Brampton Steelheads this past weekend. Charlie sends us an email, one of our favorite listeners from Kingston, to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. I know we've been saying it, but yeah, how about those Ice Dogs? Not just pounding the Steelheads on the scoreboard, but with the fists as well. I did not know Owen Flores could fight so well. I believe he was to sit another game for it, but now we get to see what Charlie Robertson has. Thoughts on this game as it was a season clash of the undefeated teams? And then that's followed up by our buddy Vince from St. Catharines. Hi, guys. The Ice Dogs are 4-0. Please explain in the space provided. 100 marks. Vince, retired high school teacher. I like that one, Vince. I like it a lot. I have no explanation, none whatsoever. But Dan, I think you alluded to something there. 3 straight years, and this is why I had them still missing. I mean, maybe 9th place, but after 3 straight years of being dead last. And I'll tell you, one of the other things, and it's not just dead last in the East, it's dead last in the league. One of the other things I was unsure of, and we talked about this with some of our other predictions where we said teams might finish lower because they're going to trade away veteran players as they begin a rebuild. So we're not really sure how much money can they put in the bank or how many points can they stockpile early. For me, with the Ice Dogs, I just think the trades have been so frequent that you never had a chance for this team to get settled. So far, I think they're playing hands off, which I think is great. Like, don't mess with this, right? As Bull Durham said, don't mess with a streak. So I'm still taking a cautious approach of this. But Vince, I'll tell you this as I give you my answer for 100 marks or less, depending on how tough a teacher you are. If they don't tinker too much, I'll qualify my answer with that, then for sure, I'm buying some Ice Dogs stock right now.
Yeah, and it's not just the tinkering, it was the directionless tinkering, right? Like, move out this type of player, then bring in that type of player 2 weeks later, bring in this kid, and then move him out 2 weeks later. It was hard to tell what they were trying to accomplish. So the stability point, I think, can't be underestimated, Mike. Like, you look at a player like Kevin He is a phenomenally talented player. He's probably long overdue to have a season like he's having right now. But players like that need that stability. They need the stability in line mates and vision for the team and coaching. etc. So I think you're starting to see what you can get from that if there's stability there. So maybe the Ice Dogs have learned that lesson. Although I will say the one thing from that game we just saw the email about the fisticuffs. I think probably no one was more concerned about that than James Richmond when he saw Jack Ivankovic starting to throw fists there. That's Jack. That's not your role, buddy. We love you. That's not your role. Keep the gloves on.
No slouch are the opponents that the Ice Dogs have run over so far, either Ottawa, Kingston, Oshawa, and that game versus Brampton that featured the old he hattie, Kevin He, with the hat trick. Excellent point, though. I love a good goalie fight as much as the next guy, and Niagara should be a little worried about it, too. Owen Flores is going to be your guy, right? So, all right. We got this email from Matt as well. And I hid this one from Dan because I want Dan's reaction. I'm almost speechless. I just think it's such a great story. So thanks to Matt in Brantford for sharing this. And it's important to note that Matt is in Brantford. So when Joey Costanzo and the Windsor Spitfires were at the Civic Center in Brantford, spanking the Bulldogs, this is a fan of the Bulldogs watching his team get whooped. Hi, Dan and Mike. Been a listener since the Bulldogs moved to Brantford. Great pod. Keep up the good work. Hey, if you ever want to start an email like that, it'll get it read for sure, right? Or maybe just send emails that say that. Like flattery will help, keep us moving because we don't do this for money. And we certainly don't do it because we're good looking. Anyway, I just thought I'd give you guys some positivity for your pod, Matt writes. On Saturday night in Brantford, Windsor whooped us pretty good. During the third period of the game, the temperature was rising both on the ice and in the crowd. Through it all, I was watching Joey Costanzo in net, who played fantastic, by the way. Costanzo kept interacting with a fan in the crowd. Originally, I thought it was a heckler. Then I realized it wasn't. The Brantford Civic Center lower ring is used for fans with disabilities. A young child who could barely see above the boards, using the assistance of a walker, decked out head to toe in Brantford Bulldogs gear, was the one interacting with Costanzo. Every time there was a stoppage, Costanzo would skate over to him and interact with him. They would laugh. He tapped the glass. It was absolutely fantastic to watch. After the game, Costanzo goes over to the bench, grabs a stick, signs it, and has the trainer run it over to give it to the kid. The amazement on the kid's face, both during the game and afterwards, was truly heartwarming to see. I thought in the heat of the battle to see a young teenager play so well, but also be as nice a person as he was, deserves to be called out. It sucks losing, but I would lose to classy guys like Joey Costanzo any day. Keep up the great work, Matt from Brantford. How do you like that one, Dan Mahar?
What a great story, and just highlights how terrific some of these kids are, right? There's a kid that gets it, a junior age kid that understands that he made that fan's season, right? He made that experience amazing for that person. He will never forget it. Little simple things, took no money, took no time, just took a little bit of heart, right? And that's what it's all about. These fans are there for this is all entertainment. In the off season, these guys aren't at war. So you just love to hear those stories, Mike. So good on you, Joey. That's in the heat of the battle to do something like that. That just proves to me you get it.
It takes me back, Dan, when I was a kid developing my appreciation for and fandom of junior hockey. I mean, it was a Cupolos sporting goods store in downtown Kitchener where the players would sometimes be doing autograph signings. There were, of course, the grocery stores where they still go. But I would be the kid in line at these places trying to get an autograph. And it was one of the biggest thrills. A lot of times when I was out playing hockey with my friends, I mean, as a Leafs fan, I already admitted that this episode. Sure, I'd be Daryl Sittler. But some other times I was Brian Bellows or Jeff Larmer or other players that played for the Kitchener Rangers. That's how much a fan I was. That's what those players, because when you're, 6, 7, 8 years old, 16 to 20-year-olds, and especially when you see them playing hockey, They're men. You look up to them. I think this is such a great story. You've got so many things, especially for goalies who are so laser focused a lot of the time. For Costanzo to engage a young fan like that, as you point out, look, that young boy is a junior hockey fan for life now, dare I say. That's not going to be a memory he soon forgets.
And a Joey Costanzo fan, right? Like
Yeah,
they'll
for sure.
remember, like you remember those positive interactions you have with those players forever. I still remember from when I was a kid, some of the players that gave you the time of day. It takes so little, but we forget these players are so young too. They're 16 to 20 years old. A lot of them haven't actually developed that skill for interaction, that adult maturity to interact with strangers, especially many who are a lot older than you. So for them to be able to figure that out at that age and get it and have those interactions and understand what it means to on the other side of the glass is just it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, it makes me feel even worse for the teenager slash young man that I became, the obnoxious one that would chirp the players on the bench instead of look up to them and idolize them and ask for their autograph. Man, I was a jerk. Oh, what the hell? I still am. Way to go, Joey Costanzo. That is a fantastic story. And Matt, thanks for, I mean, Dan and I get to a lot of rinks, but we can't be everywhere every night. And thanks to Matt in Brantford, who enjoys the pod, we get to share that story with you. Fantastic stuff from Joey Costanzo, the goaltender of the undefeated in regulation Windsor Spitfires. They're not quite the Niagara Ice Dogs, but they're undefeated in regulation. All right. One more piece of business for us on this week's episode, Dansky, and that is our prospect of the week. Who you got?
Well, I'm not exactly going off board for these ones this early in the season, Mike. And I mean, leading the league, draft eligible, 13 points in 5 games. I got to go with Porter Martone. Not even usually waiting for the 22nd mark of games to get on the board lately. Some quick goals coming off those steelhead sticks, and usually he's involved. Just a phenomenal talent. We knew we were going to enjoy watching him all year. Question is whether or not he'll be back next year because he is that good and he's already putting on a show early. Don't even want to calculate that point pace. But yeah, I've got to go with the league leader so far, Mike. That's Porter Martone. Who have you got?
Yeah, he was absolutely the easy choice, which is why I skipped over him. Porter, I'm sorry, but my message to you is stop being so good because I don't want to look like I'm taking the easy way out. No disrespect, Dan, because you're absolutely right. The guy has been otherworldly early in the season. I instead went a little bit deeper down and found Jack Nesbitt of the Windsor Spitfires, 2 goals, 2 assists, and a +2 this week. And he's a point per game so far this. Well, he's had a point, pardon me, in every game so far this season. 8 points over 5 games and a +6 overall. So not a bad start to the season for young Jack Nesbitt, who hopes to turn some National Hockey League heads this season. I go with Nesbitt as my prospect of the week.
That's a great call. I actually thought Nesbitt showed a fair bit last year in a turbulent year in Windsor, but I thought he had played with an edge, had some skill. When you look at his age, you were just saying, "Oh, look out! This kid's going to be something." And that's why I was a big part of the reason why I was so high in Windsor this year is players like Nesbitt stepping way up in his weight class. So yeah, great call on Jack Nesbitt.
I got to say, I really enjoyed our back and forth, Dan, as we prepared the topics we were going to be covering this week. It's so early in the season, and we had so much meat on the bone. I mean, it just makes me. I've been enjoying. I said this to Paul Fixter, who I do the broadcasts with for the Rangers. I just I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's early in the season and I'm not worn down yet, and it's not the winter, and I'm taking these long trips. We're out for a long trip this week, so hello, Flint, Saginaw, and Sault Ste. Marie. We're coming your way. But I've just felt so energized being in the rinks for whatever reason. Even though the weather is so nice outside, there's just something. There's just something. That Saturday night at the Bay Shore, a 3-3 weekend, but looked forward to going to the rink every day. That's a fantastic league, and they have given us an awful lot to talk about and enjoy just 2 weeks into the season.
It's been a terrific start, Mike. And you're right. There's storylines everywhere, and everyone is looking relatively competitive right now, or at least has some positives to drum up. So when there's excitement in most of the markets, that makes for a good start.
Get ready because Easton Cowan and the London Knights are coming for you. I saw a few people enjoying the look of the Midwest division. Suddenly the Kitchener Rangers are in first and the London Knights are in fifth. I don't think it's going to stay that way forever. So anybody that was enjoying watching London in the basement of their division. Brace yourself, because here comes the Cowboy.
I think it might look a little different in a couple months. I think you're right.
We'll keep our eyes on that and everything else, and you'll hear all about those observations every week right here on the OHL podcast.